So you've been learning about energy and the energy that's in everything, that everything really is energy. You've been learning about the energy of our own bodies, our auric and field, our chakras. So let's talk about Reiki, what it is and what it does and how we utilize it. Reiki is actually a specific grouping of energies. It's a specific group of frequencies that are very high and very healing. When we tap into these frequencies, we channel them through us. We're able to direct those to an individual, be that another person or ourselves, or to a situation or an event. And that energy that we send is a compilation of different frequencies. It's this energy that's all around us constantly, and it's just tapping into a particular portion of that that's a very whole, very healing, very loving portion of that energy. When we talk about using Reiki, one beautiful thing is that we realize that it's a channeled energy. That means that when we channel Reiki, we don't deplete ourselves of our own energetic field. We tap into this unlimited source of energy that's all around us, and we direct it to a certain instance. That means that after doing a healing session with Reiki, we oftentimes find that we feel ourselves energized and feel a little bit more whole and cleansed ourselves, because that energy, as it flows through us, informs our own energetic field as well as that to which we're sending it. Oftentimes when people utilize healing energies, they find that at the end of the session or at the end of the work, they feel exhausted, or sometimes they may even take on the illness of the one that they were working on. And that happens because they were not channeling an energy from this unlimited source. Instead, they were depleting themselves of their own life energy. So when we use Reiki, it's a beautiful thing to remember that it's actually a channeled energy. It's actually something that's an unlimited supply that we channel through us rather than taking from within ourselves. And we oftentimes get a beautiful benefit of empowering and enlightening ourselves as we utilize this energy. One thing to remember with Reiki is that it's an intelligent energy, is what it's often called. Reiki knows where it needs to go. It knows what a healing needs to look like for this individual, and it knows what needs to be done. So it's not magic. It's not something that we control. It's something that we work as in a partnership with. We work as partners with the Reiki energy to channel it and direct it for the greatest good of an individual. Oftentimes when we do Reiki treatments, we want to see a healing. And what we think of as a healing is, I want the pain gone, or I want this situation alleviated. One thing that's important to remember, though, is that healing looks very, very different depending upon the situation and depending upon the needs. Sometimes a healing means that the pain actually is gone. Sometimes it means that the physical is healed or the emotional is healed. However, sometimes a healing means that a person gets to go through the entirety of the experience because that is what they need to learn the lessons that they have signed up for. Sometimes actually going through the entirety of the experience is for the person's greatest good. And Reiki then, in that instance, as it heals, helps the person to go through that situation and actually make their way through every experience, and it supports them as they do that. It doesn't always mean that what we would typically think of a healing occurs. However, in the higher perspective of what healing means and looking at the actual greatest good, a healing always does occur. We'll talk sometimes about how Reiki can heal into life or heal into death. Reiki can heal through pain, it can alleviate pain, it can do many things depending upon what is needed for the greatest good. I remember one time at home, we had just purchased 2 snakes, and they were little baby snakes, and one of them was doing really well, and the other one was just struggling, and it was just sick and not doing well. And one day I went into the room where we had these snakes, and I just felt that I needed to pick it up and hold it. So I held it, and it fit right between my 2 palms. It was so small, and I picked it up, and I just held it there, and it just curled up. And I sat there, and I directed energy to it. I channeled that energy to the snake for several minutes, and it was just still as could be. And after those several minutes, I felt that it was time to put it back, so I did. And within about 10 minutes, that snake had actually died. And it was an interesting lesson for me because it very strongly showed me again how healing works. And when you're looking at the greatest good and what that healing looks like, doing Reiki, sending that Reiki to that snake, didn't heal it miraculously. It wasn't suddenly healthy and whole and ready to live a full life. But it helped to ease its transition so that it no longer had to suffer. It no longer had to go through these things. It was evidently prepared, and it was the time, and that Reiki energy helped to support it through the rest of its experience until it was able to finally release itself of the sickness and the discomfort it was going through. So remember that healings look very different. And remember that Reiki is an intelligent energy, knows where it needs to go, and it knows what needs to be done. So we don't force the energy. We don't force the idea of our view of what a healing entails in a situation. Reiki is much more effective when we sit back and we allow. We allow it to do what it needs to do, and we trust in the energy. We trust that what needs to happen will occur, and we work in partnership with the Reiki energy. Now, one thing to remember with Reiki is that it's not always a standalone therapy. With Reiki, oftentimes we can solely use that energy. Oftentimes, if we get a cold or if we're feeling a little bit down, we can just use that energy. However, it's not always something to be used alone. When we utilize Reiki, there are several other objects and tools and techniques that we can use, be they metaphysical or holistic, or be they actually more in the Western medical realm. Reiki is a great foundational energy. It goes with anything. You can channel Reiki when you're at the doctor's office having a bone set. You can channel Reiki when you are using sound therapy. You can channel Reiki during a massage. Reiki is a beautiful foundational therapy that goes with absolutely any other technique that you're using. And if you feel to use them in conjunction with each other, then do so. A beautiful thing, though, again, is that when we do channel Reiki, it helps with our consciousness and it helps with our awareness, which does a great deal towards healing, and the energy itself does a great deal towards healing, so we don't always need to use it with other techniques. I find in my own life that Reiki oftentimes takes care of any illness that I feel coming on before it gets to the point of some type of an emergency or critical state where I feel the need to work with other techniques and modalities as well. So Reiki can be used on its own very well, and frequently is. However, remember, it's not something that is meant to be the end-all be-all. Utilize your intelligence, utilize the energy that you have, that spiritual understanding that we all have, to trust the universe and trust our direction that we receive as to what modality we use when and how they work together. I mentioned a little bit about what it feels like to do Reiki. When you're channeling Reiki, it can feel very different. Sometimes we feel a warmth in our hands. Sometimes we feel a coldness or a tingling. Sometimes we don't feel anything at all. And the sensations vary. But an important thing is to remember to trust the energy. Know that Reiki is flowing with the intention that Reiki flows. And after having gone through the attunement process and being attached and tuned into that Reiki frequency, Reiki will flow. It will do what it needs to do, and you can trust that. When I got into Reiki, I doubted myself a great deal. I had grown up in a very conservative home with very conservative beliefs and didn't trust that this was anything that I could do. I believed that others could do it, but I didn't trust that I could do it. And it was very frustrating for me because I oftentimes didn't feel the energy flowing through my hands. I didn't feel the warmth or the tingling or anything that people talk about. And so I doubted that Reiki was actually flowing through me. I remember one experience that I had that was incredibly profound, however. One day I had an ache in my shoulder. My muscle was just tight and aching. And so I decided to go ahead and give it a try. I was still trying to do the Reiki, trying to let it channel. And so I put my hand up on my shoulder and I felt the most odd sensation I had ever felt in my life. I felt nothing in my hand, just as I had felt nothing since my first degree attunement. However, in my shoulder, I felt this great deal of heat. And it was so odd because typically when we touch ourselves, it's kind of difficult to tell the difference as to, am I feeling this in my hand or am I feeling it in my shoulder? But there was a very clear distinction that I felt nothing in my hand, but I could feel the energy very strongly in my shoulder. And I knew that the Reiki was flowing. This was a profound experience for me because it reminded me again to trust, to know that whatever I as a practitioner feel in the energy is not necessarily the same as what the person receiving the energy is feeling, and that I can trust that. Sometimes I may feel a great deal through my hands and the person receiving the energy doesn't notice it immediately. Over time, they may notice the effects of it, however. But in that instant, we oftentimes feel different sensations. And so again, the important thing is to trust the energy. Know that it is flowing and know that it is there supporting and providing this beautiful, healing, loving frequency. One thing to remember is, as it supports us, Reiki can do no harm. It is such a high frequency and such a loving frequency that it always heals, and it always heals for the greatest good. Don't be concerned that you might ever do any damage when you're channeling Reiki, because that is absolutely contrary to the very nature of the energy. It can do no harm. Reiki always works to support and to heal and to provide a loving presence to support us as we go through the experiences that we chose during our lives.